Much for the introduction, Crispin.
You're welcome.
Cool. I'm just going to quickly present my screen. All right, hi everybody. I'm Walt and I'm going to be talking about interaction design. I'm a lecturer for interaction design at the Academy. And as you've heard in the introduction today, our interaction design degree is a fully accredited BA degree. And as you'll see in this presentation, it is informed by various specializations in the industry, in the field, which we find is ever-changing, ever-developing with technology. And as such, our interaction design degree is also changing and developing as technology grows. So we sort of like to keep everything updated so that our students do feed into the industry where they are needed. And we find that this is sort of an ever-growing field. And, you know, at this point, it makes a lot of sense to actually have a focus into interaction design. But as we'll see today, interaction design is a lot more than just want to quickly check that my mic is not muted or anything. Here we go. You'll find today that interaction design is a whole lot more than what meets the eye. There's really a lot of various aspects, a lot of thought that goes into interaction design. So at this point, it is very useful to explain to everybody what interaction design is really about, what it entails, because it gets to become a little bit of an abstract concept to speak about, but you'll find that interaction design is so ubiquitous in our everyday lives that it really does help to think about it whether or not you are a specialist in the field. And that interaction design really do overlap a lot with some of the other offerings as well in the school, like motion design, like communication design, and sort of becomes a blending of a whole lot of disciplines in one. And at its core is design. Now, I just remind some of our viewers to post some questions if you have some questions for the Q&A afterwards into the chat. Okay, so very helpful to define interaction design. And here's a great definition from the Interaction Design Association. Now, it basically defines the structure and the behavior of interactive systems, simply put, apps, websites, appliances, and so on. Interaction designers strive to create meaningful relationships between people and the products and services that they use, from computers to mobile devices to appliances and beyond. Our practices are evolving with the world. And we find that our relationships with technology is very, very important in the sense that it can either help or hinder us. And we sort of like to sort of think about that in this field. So to give you a few examples of what interaction design covers, it is things like any kind of device that has a certain way of working with appliances. If you see knobs and dials and switches and a certain way of using it, a lot of interaction design goes into that because we're really trying to connect the person with the technology. And then obvious examples are things like websites, computer applications, even the operating system on your computer has been thought about and visually communicated to the user, that's you, in some way. And of course, we talk about applications, which is the big thing nowadays. We do more on our phones than we do than we do on our computers nowadays. And we find that sort of we came from a place where interaction with a smartphone was, fairly unintuitive, fairly based on steps and previous knowledge. And now just about anybody can pick up a phone app and use that app. And that's mainly sort of thanks to the field and the sort of theories and discussions within interaction design to make human-computer interaction a lot more easier and a lot more intuitive and in the end, a lot more usable. So our degree is pretty much about those kinds of things. Now, I should also mention that interaction design covers a whole lot more than these obvious aspects. We're also sort of very concerned with the structure of services anywhere where we find that sort of a human, a person, or a user, as we like to call them, interacts with an application, they might be accessing a service. And we can think about the specifics of that service. Here I've got Uber as an example. So an interaction designer would think about how does it look on the driver's side? How does it look on the client side? How do the two communicate with each other? How does the payment system work? How is the user informed about, when the driver will sort of arrive? So we sort of get to think about every sort of little stop in the roadmap to using a certain service and the technology involved in that. Okay, and then we can also extend interaction design as to actual spaces where users would physically walk through the space, and how that would sort of guide and lead them to new conclusions or conversion when it comes to business goals. And then we can also sort of expand that into things like furniture. It has a certain way of working, and full experiences really that has a number of different components, physical and digital. So if you think about, for instance, the F&B banking experience, how everything has been so sort of blended to feel very similar, and it feels very fluent, and experience is a really big focus of interaction design, as I'll get to. Okay, so one thing to note in interaction design is it is not coding. We're not talking about multimedia design as such. It's very beneficial to know coding. Our students do touch on a little bit of coding, but it is not just that. It's not really comparable with something like computer science. And in fact, if you want to move into interaction design from school, you don't need anything like computer science, because we're only really talking about problem solving, and we're talking about focusing on a user and a user interface and that whole experience involved, and the whole technicality bit of it is something that we can negotiate with more technical people, and we develop the skills to be able to talk about those things, and we develop the insight as we look at little things like coding, but not in particular. All right, so it's worth mentioning that there's a few different outcomes that we sort of focus on in interaction design. And the first of these design outcomes is the most obvious one, is interface. And we're talking about the arrangement of buttons, functions that are useful to a user. And our students do touch on various briefs in which they go and design some of these interfaces to work best. For instance, here I've got a physical example of a remote design, which was done in a first-year project. We've got a third here, a little example here from Luca, which is this sort of task app, which had to be thought of and had to be structured and then had to be visually designed to represent something that is usable, but also then very informed by who we are designing that for. And all of those various functions within an app, or aside from being arranged very pretty and designed very pretty, that all of these sort of functions are useful and in the end very usable to a user. And we sort of come up with some better experiences as we do that. A second outcome in interaction design is structure. So that's the useful arrangement of information, functions, and tasks as they relate to someone's goals. So you can think about using an app, let's say Facebook, and you'll find that, we don't really think of it when we are using an app, but there is a certain structure. So if you're making a post on Facebook, what are the steps that you go through in doing that? What can you do within that process? What are you capable of doing? And then, once you're done with the action, where does it go? And how can you stay connected to that action throughout your user experience? So we get to think about that as well. So we get to think about the whole structure of something like an app and a website, and how it would feel for a user to go through those different processes. And we can streamline it, and we can make it better. And we can come up with some really cool digital solutions to some problems. And lastly, we would also like to think about behavior, because of course, when you're using something like a computer, like an app, like a website, we really want to feel that there is almost another person on the other end, that it feels alive, that it is responsive to you, that it gives you guidance, that it can correct your errors. So we can think about all those sorts of things and devise a behavior for the system that we're doing. And we sort of do it in lots of fun, interesting, and creative ways throughout the 3 years studying interaction. For instance, here is the first year example at the front from Jane here. And she thought about, for her first year app design project, of designing a teleportation app. Now, of course, teleportation doesn't exist, but if one were to build an app for it, how would that app respond to someone who's quite nervous about being teleported and dematerialized to somewhere else in the world? So she had to come up with screens that would guide the user, tell them that they're teleporting in a few seconds, certain warnings that you have to maybe accept, a countdown with the ability to cancel if you want to chicken out of the teleportation. And then, what happens afterwards? Can you rate your dematerialization? Can you leave a comment? Can you improve the service? So it's really thinking about the service and the user and sort of the whole process of using something like an app, and it's far beyond just having a very pleasant look to it. It is something that needs to feel alive as well. Okay, so in our degree, we've basically got two focuses, or two main outcomes, if we can call it like that. We've got UI and UX. Of course, UI is user interface and UX is user experience. So talking first about user interface, as I also mentioned, the most obvious aspect of interaction design. And that's basically the visual outcome that we use to describe a system that supports our users' goals and the functions that they need. So when we do it well, there's a certain ease of use and there's a certain usability to it. And then the visual appeal also gets tagged onto that. So the example that you see before you is one I showed a little bit earlier from Luca, which is a little to-do app. And here you see the mobile version of that. And this has a lot to do with sort of structuring the various tasks of this to-do app, and providing the user with a bit of feedback and providing them with useful functions first. So it's just sort of coming up with an interface that really sort of serves the purpose of this particular app. Then a large focus really is the user experience. And user experience is sort of a term that's sort of come into play within the last couple of years. And we find that there are user experience designers in a lot of fields of business, but then also particularly within interaction design. Since we sort of live in this highly connected world, we are bombarded with all sorts of products and services from all angles. You guys know what the app, or rather the ad environment is like when we're out there, not so much surfing on cyberspace like we used to, but just living in our technological world. So what we really want to create for the next generation, and this one, is a greater, a better user experience that gives our users some value, as well as meeting some business goals. So we want to build a little bit of equity between users of technology and businesses, and we want to sort of give them value by paying attention to what the user experience is. And this is a big field for our students. Okay, so the example that I have here, and I'll expand on this particular project a little bit later when I go through student work, is they had to sort of think about a space in which to navigate, and sort of think about the whole experience, the buying experience. And the student here created an app that goes with it, that sort of guides and reacts to different areas of the store. This is quite an interesting way of conceptualizing user experience. Okay, so basically, user experience is just a shift in thinking from using technology to creating digital experiences through interactions with websites, apps, and devices. And it's more than just using technology. We have to think about what that experience is. And sort of the way that we get to do that within interaction design is we've got a big focus on developing empathy and understanding with real people. So we take a look at real people and we try to conceptualize who they are and to come up with sort of realistic representations of people to sort of try out our designs. And we get informed, and as we take our students through the degree, how to interact with people, how to conduct interviews, how to make observations, how to do testing, so that we can come up with the best experience and then indeed a design solution to the products and services that we're trying to create. And this sort of readies our students up for the industry in which this field is highly sought after, or rather the specialization is highly sought after. Okay, so with that being said, I've got a few selected works that I quickly want to sort of go through. Now that we sort of know what interaction design is about, I want to show you a little bit of what our students have been doing, because it's fairly interesting to see that all the different kinds of approaches in which one can learn about interaction design and then indeed become a useful interaction designer by third year. So in first year, all of our students on foundation level gets to take interaction design, and this year we've been running the design thinking module. And we really sort of learn within this module that design really means doing with intent. And interaction design is really just design at its most purest form, in my opinion. And we sort of take our students through developing a methodology where they get to, in this particular project, go into a park and find out from people how, this is obviously pre-COVID, but how is, what is it like being a user of the park, being a park goer? What is your experience like? Where are certain points in which your park experience is lacking a little bit? And then they go on to think about how they can improve it. But before they do that, they have to really define a problem. So they get to sort of methodically go and analyze different pain points, conduct interviews, and really define who is using the park by taking photos, conducting interviews, making observations. So this is already something that they get to learn. And then eventually they get to implement their own little park design in which they can plan out a journey for their user and think about where are the various areas where they'll stop for water or where they'll sit down, and sort of come up with the most useful places and the most useful feature to build into this little park. And then they go on to build a little scale model, and we can then go and discuss it, and we can sort of make better suggestions, and we can sort of backtrack a little bit and really sort of discover that design is an iterative process. And really a prototype is a great way for us to sort of envision this. And a lot of the time in interaction design, most times really, we design prototypes and we put them to the test. And that's what really makes this such a peer design discipline, in the sense that we always connect it back to who we're designing it for. And then our first year just culminates in that creative app design, like the teleportation app you saw earlier, where we get to think about the structure. And as you can see here on the screen, this is quite a detailed, very sort of detailed oriented, very structural plan that our students can come up with. And they do that with guidance, and they do that with discussion to sort of come up with what is the best solutions and how to connect a whole structure together into a very interesting design. And of course, then the beautiful visuals that come on top of it, what they learn from user interface design, and how to apply it in the best ways and to make it visually appealing and interesting. This example here is just a little recipe app that is coupled with booking a chef. Came out as a very interesting and very appealing looking app design project, as you can see from the app screens over here. Okay, and then the second year we touch on things a little bit more related to the world out there, more business world, in which our students then are sort of feel themselves equipped with the skills to go and make analyses of existing apps and sort of see in what areas are they outdated, and in what areas can there be a better experience, a better user experience, and what areas is the interface, could it offer better usability and better communication. So over here, the student looked at a website called, or rather an app called Footlocker. And what Jenna did here is she made an analysis of it, did her research, identified a few pain points, made better solutions, and then went and tested and discussed those solutions to eventually come up with a new design for Footlocker over here, as you can see, with an updated user interface that works in a little bit more modern way, more structured way that can actually boost sales and provide more value to the user and give an overall more pleasant experience. And then lastly, in third year, as I mentioned before, with the sort of space creation website, we've got a sketch here from Luca where he had to sort of use a beacon within the store that basically connects to an app on the phone, which can lead a user to various products within a store. And this is where it gets to a little bit more conceptual, a little bit more future forward thinking into interaction design, as in what will our experiences of tomorrow look like. And within this project, you got to think about, how would this app lead a person through the store and help them and aid them in making purchases. So you got to think about what this whole experience would be and plan it out and discuss it. And this is all sort of informed by how users behave in the first place. And they sort of came up with this little very structured, interesting looking app. And as you can see from this little example here, used a few elements of motion design within the app, great communication design skills, and just sort of provided a really cool experience on the app itself that allows a person to have detailed information about a product as you are in store, and even then complete your purchase as you actually sort of view these things in the store. And as you can see from the little video here, they're just sort of making their purchase. And the nice thing is that you can use this app and you can go to the till point and you can sort of scan the code and you can just pick up your packaged clothes after you've had this shopping experience. Okay, so very briefly, just mentioning a few careers in interaction design before we go on to the Q&A. With a degree in interaction design, there's various specializations that you can go into, and you can even have some of these specializations overlap. So obvious things are web designer, app designer, generally a user interface designer that could work in tandem with developers and other user experience designers to get interfaces that are more usable. We've got UX designers, which mostly specify in the experience field, the user experience field, information architects, usability experts, and even researchers. So as you build up some of those people skills, we sort of develop a lot of things in our toolbox that can sort of directly feed into positions in the industry. So I think interaction design is a highly exciting field to go into, and I'm excited to see what sort of specializations are going to evolve from interaction design. All right, so I want to open up to Q&A and also introduce a student that will be joining me third year, Willem Smit, who is one of our rising stars in interaction design. So let me quickly take a look if there are any questions. Okay. Cool. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer? All right. So I think I'm just going to talk a little bit with Willem. And Willem, being a third year student, he will be graduating soon as he's, and within his final year, there's been some really exciting projects to work on, and I just sort of want to hear a little bit from Willem, and especially sort of what is your relationship to the technical aspects in interaction design, such as coding, and what really is your focus and your specialization, passion within interaction design?
Firstly, hi everyone. Just to quickly, I just want to lead with